if we look at this perspective of anger as emotion, it's just energy in motion. And if the energy has nowhere to go, it's just going to pile up inside this vessel, this human vessel.
All right, Rising Man fam, I've got a new friend of mine joining me here today, Cyrus Henry, coming in live from Nicaragua. Where in Nicaragua are you at the moment?
I'm currently in San Juan del Sur. It's about like an hour north of the Costa Rican border.
Got you. And if you guys can detect that accent there, he's coming to Nicaragua by way of Sydney, Australia, and then originally in New Zealand. Where in New Zealand are you from? What's your hometown?
Yeah, you really picked it really well. My accent goes between Australia and New Zealand. I was born in the North Island, and then I was raised in the South Island. So both islands are my home.
Got you. Okay, so first off, how does a native New Zealander make his way all the way out to Nicaragua and get stuck there? Give us the quick overview of the story.
The quick overview is I'm a professional performer by trade, dancer, musician, and actor. And I accepted an international contract working over in Miami on the launch of Virgin Voyages cruise ship. It was the inaugural cast. And so I went over to Miami to install the show. And just before we were about to do our press release, the show got canceled. And I asked my family in New Zealand to come home, but they said no. So I was pretty shattered actually, because like as a performing artist, like we have to plan financially ahead if we want to take time off and take time away. Because we're going to get holiday pay. And so I had all this money that I'd acquired, and I was like, yes, I can go home finally and just like chill out, stress-free. But then my family said no. I'm like, okay, I'm meant to be somewhere else. And I had a friend that I grew up with from New Zealand in Nicaragua. So I came to Nicaragua for the purpose of safety and to bunker down. So then I can go back to my contract, because we thought COVID was going on in the last 2 months. And yeah, so I got stuck here, and now I've pivoted and shifted to be here, and also pivoted careers to be here in Nicaragua.
Wow. Okay. So I got a couple of questions, follow-up questions. Yeah. So what's the story behind your family saying no? They just didn't have space for you, or they didn't want you coming home? What's the story there?
No, it was because the reason was because I was scared of COVID. And because my grandmother had a stroke at the start of the year. And so it was like, we know that your immune system is quite strong, but New Zealand is a small place, so maybe it's better if you stay there. And so that's kind of, yeah. And in the same breath, in those 2 years that I've been here, man, I have like died and rebirthed so many times and stepped more into the reason and why I'm here right now speaking with you and your tribe.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit more. And I could definitely relate to the death and rebirth many times over. I feel like that's what the whole planet's been experiencing in this crazy 2 years of time that we've been enduring. And yeah, I imagine that must have, well, I imagine it might have brought up many things, but to have the desire to go home to family, because sometimes especially we're talking about men here, right? So yeah. There's a point in our lives where all we want to do is get away from our family, right? It's go out, adventure, see the world, slay the dragons. Yeah. But to have that feeling of genuinely wanting to return home to family and then not have that available, how was that for you?
When I received that response, I was pretty well gutted, pretty heartbroken. At the same time, in the same breath, I really trust flow, spirit, guidance. And so I was like, okay, I'm just meant to go somewhere else. And like being here in Nicaragua, I'm like, definitely was meant to be here.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. There's no mistakes with that, right? All right.
No, not at all.
Well, before I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to go a little bit deeper, obviously look at the highlight reel version of your introduction before they listen to the recording. But before we do that, I ask every one of my guests the same question when they come on the show the first time. And that is, in your opinion, what does it mean to be a man?
That's a good question. It's a very layered question. What does it mean to be a man? The two words that come up for me is 3 words, actually. A man that it leads with his heart, and with love, a man that has integrity with word and with feeling, and a man that lives a life full of purpose. And within the same breath of saying that is intentionally approaching everything in life purposefully.
Yeah, what that brings up for me is this element that I think is so critical in those points you brought up is claiming our authority for ourselves to decide what that purpose is. So many of us have that experience of being groomed to be a doctor, being groomed by our families to go to college, and having a trajectory planned for us by our caregivers and guardians, where we never actually reclaim authority, where we never actually say, hey, thank you guys for driving the bus. I'm going to take the wheel now, and I've got it from here. Such a pivotal moment in our lives as men. So tied in with what you say, I think, is that claiming authority and creating possibilities and choice, because it's not my job or role to tell anyone else what their individual or unique purpose is. Same as I would never want somebody to try and do that to me. But there is that dynamic that tends to happen as we're growing up, where our family impresses upon us an idea of who we should be or how we should be in the world. I wonder if you had have an experience like that, especially coming from your family, and give the audience an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Maori culture and what that journey into purpose is like.
Yeah, a little short story about my navigation through life as a child right up into an adult is, so I'm a sibling of 7. And us 4 older brothers were adopted out to family friends because our mother wasn't quite ready to support us. And then my personal story, I was interweaved within my mother's life. I was interweaved between my mother's life. And so within saying that, there wasn't quite here's an idea or like a specific trajectory that you could follow. It was more so like, there wasn't any guidance of like, go this way. And share a little bit more about that. I moved back in with my mother at the age of 7 to 7 and 14 with her and her partner, my stepfather. But I left at 14 because of reasons. And I learned a lot from my stepfather in terms of work ethic, education, and business. And at the same time, like I wasn't as interested in education and intellect growing up. I was a very typical Kiwi boy, just wanted to play sports and hang out with the boys. And so interestingly enough, like when I moved away from my mom and my stepfather, I grew close to my big brother's girlfriend's mum, which provided this nurture and this guidance. And I remember there's a couple of points in my teenager life where, you know, the New Zealand dream is to play for the All Blacks, play rugby. And I was reasonably pretty good at rugby and sports. One of my friends' dads, who was a coach, a representative footy coach, rugby coach, just said to me, we were just hanging out at his place, and he was like, why don't you just do something different from the normal Kiwi? I was like, okay. And then as I was about to leave high school, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to go to the army and hang out with the boys. But then that woman, that's my big brother's girlfriend's mum, who supported me through school and my creative dance endeavors, was like, no, you're going to dance school. And that was it.
Wow. So you had like a guardian angel of a woman, your older brother's girlfriend's mom, who stepped in and became this like guardian angel figure for you. Wow.
Yes. Okay. Became this little nurture, which also, she also, which I identify as my first spiritual mentor, because she introduced me to like crystals and meditation.
Gotcha. And how old are you now, just for reference?
I'm 28.
28. Okay. So this is like 7 years ago we're talking about? A little more?
This is, like I went to dance school, university when I was 17.
Oh, okay. Got you.
Around that time. Yeah.
Okay. So like a decade ago.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then bring us up to speed, because obviously some of the deeper work that you're into now, you already alluded to the performance career that you had, that COVID just threw a wrench in everything that we were all planning on doing. Yeah. And then now you've pivoted into this career where you're really working with the emotional healing and emotional release work with men. So how did that all evolve? Because I know that my journey was very personal, right? Everything that I do with Rising Man is a reflection of what I needed that I wasn't getting at a certain stage in my life. So what was that journey like for you, and how your medicine unfolded?
Yeah. Really good question. So after I studied performing arts and went to study the diploma of energy healing, and I asked myself, like, how do I want to share this work? Firstly, it came up with men, and then my indigenous culture. At that moment, I had no awareness why I wanted to work with men. I was like, I just connect with men. And like, as I started to peel back the layers of my own conditioning, trauma, and self-development, I realized that the reason why I'm working with men and why I'm so passionate about is because the lack of that I had growing up. And like, it's been like, I'm saying, like, over the last 2-3 years, I'm like, this is why I'm doing this work. And so it's interesting for myself. And why I say it's interesting is because I was led into this path, not fully understanding why. And then as I started to share the work, I was like, this is why, because of the father that I didn't have. And my stepfather became abusive, physically abusive. And then also he was the breadwinner in the family. And therefore there was a lack of protection from my brothers and my uncles. Like, why didn't they step in? Because he was also the breadwinner in the extended family. And so therefore I also have trauma with around money, and like, money means control. And so there's like all these parts that I'm looking for in terms of the father figure, and also the mother figure has all led me to this place of like this deep passion for working with men on the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine.
Let's dig in a little bit more to the father wound. So tell me again, what happened to your biological father?
So us four older ones don't know our fathers. It was all of, we could use the term a one-night stand, if you will. And therefore why my mother wasn't quite ready to support us, and offered her, and like, this one family friend stepped in and helped to support. And then when she got back on her, got a bit more grounded, she asked us, just me and my younger brother, to come live with her. So yeah. So
you never got to know your biological father?
No.
And then a stepfather came into the picture who wasn't there for you. And I also heard you talk about the uncles that you said didn't really fill in the gaps. So just an invitation to speak a little bit more about that, man. And I ask you, knowing that this is like a sensitive thing. I know you can speak to it because it's the work that you've done. But I also think it's important because there's so many men who have different father wounds based on the relationship we had with a father who was our actual father, which we all have. Every single one of us has a father, whether we never met him or we grew up with him. But then also the fatherly figures that we had, whether it was uncles or not even blood relatives. So just going a little bit deeper into your relationship and what emerged from those wounds you had.
So a couple of wounds around the masculine is, firstly, not knowing my father. Secondly, having a stepfather who was kind to us at the beginning and then started to shift, and therefore started to express anger and physical abuse to me and my younger brother. And then I was also surrounded by my mom's brothers were quite big men. There's Maori men are quite big and quite strong. And also my older brothers, but yet there was this resistance. I didn't see them step in for my safety and to say, hey, that's not right what you're doing to Cyrus. And so therefore there was a distrust also within. So because my stepfather has money or is working really hard, it creates this like letting off and letting things slide because of that. And so like, as I've gotten older and also diving into this work and now speaking to my aunties and my uncles and just hearing this reflection back of like, yeah, what you guys went through wasn't good. And it's really like, it's only starting to unravel in the last couple of years, especially also with my younger siblings. They're like, yeah, what you guys went through. Like, it's me and my younger brother that went through the same path together.
Now, have you been able to have an open dialogue with your siblings and your aunties, uncles, maybe your mom or even your stepdad about those experiences, kind of going back in time and revisiting it for healing?
My mom, yes. And been working on that for like the last 10 years is a funny story. I was working with my first mentor, my second mentor, my spiritual mentor, and we're doing like an energetic shielding technique. And could you imagine like first bubble, second bubble, third bubble, and based upon those levels of bubbles is like who will be in like what part. Usually the first one is an intimate partner, someone really close, and then like best friends and family. My mentor said, invite your mother into your first bubble. I was like chill in a guided meditation, like really like, yeah, cool, doing the exercise. I broke. Just like my voice broke, everything. And I like screamed out, no. And I was like, whoa, this is when I was like 20, 21. And I was like, whoa, there is some work there. And there's a lot of resentment I had also towards my mother for not protecting me. And also there was also a lack of emotional availability. And so I started to work on that. I started to speak to my mother and like, hey, this is what I'm working through and I would love to start to get to know you. So that's one part of that. I've only recently, actually in the last month, had a solid conversation with one of my sisters about that moment in time. And she shared, just some reflections on she said that her and her sister felt responsible for what me and my brother went through. And therefore us leaving them because we left, like we're going to go, we got an opportunity to leave. And then, I've had some conversations with some aunties and they're like, and some uncles, and they're like, yeah, what you guys went through wasn't good. And so, yeah.
Big work, man. I just want to acknowledge you because I like to say nobody makes it out alive. But what I mean by that is that nobody makes it to our 20s, 30s, 40s, wherever we're at without going through something, even if you grew up with mom and dad around, you grew up and you had some money in your family, everyone's got some challenge. There's nobody just like skates right into adulthood untouched. Right. So I really want to just acknowledge and appreciate your particular journey and what you went through, and also the courage to be the one in your family to say, hey, let's talk about these things. Because to me, that's real leadership. That's what ancestral and generational healing looks like. And it is really fucking uncomfortable. It's and I'll say, because I've definitely had experiences like that in my own family of bringing a lot of the things that I've learned out in the world, feeling like the black sheep of the family, who's like the one doing life very alternatively, and bringing those conversations back to my parents, to my two brothers, to my extended family, and even my friends, like the friends I grew up with. And it's an uncomfortable position to be in, but it's, in my opinion, it's a very important role to play. Very selfless role to play. It's a service to the family and from where we come from.
I totally agree and resonate. And the healing that you do is healing for all. And like to speak to that conversation, there's still like one big conversation that I am actively calling in, which is with my brother, because we haven't spoken about anything that we've ever gone through.
The brother that you were paired with?
Yeah. And so I'm waiting for that day to come.
Beautiful, bro. Well, I want to just evolve our conversation from there, because it's really important groundwork that you laid for us to know where you come from and how you've gotten into the work that you're doing now. One of the things that stood out when we talked about having this conversation was talking about men's relationship with anger. To me, this is one of the three most important conversations that men need to be having. I actually think it's at the root of many other conversations that are happening on the surface, is the fact that the beliefs that were introduced to us around anger and what an angry man is in society, and what to do with anger, where anger belongs, what it means if we become angry, how we're disciplined around anger as children in school and at home with our families. So I just love to get a baseline perspective of yours around men and anger and how society has held that for so many years.
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. And how I've approached it is, like you said, society has conditioned men that expressing anger is unsafe. And if you express a little bit of anger or any remnants of anger, you're violent. If you express any part of emotion, you're too sensitive. And so therefore, this conditioning of suppressing anger and emotions is like a really big program within the men. Like I also resonate with you that it is what I feel also at a lot of root of a lot of layers for men that may be experiencing confusion. Confusion is the big one. And how to safely express emotion and communicate anger. And falls into this line of the archetype of the shadow warrior of like, I don't know, it's not safe for you to be physical, to express anger, to express rage. And on the other spectrum of anger and rage is a lot of passion. And as I've dived into this work, I ask myself, like, why am I comfortable with anger and rage? Why is it comfortable for me? And it was so clear, because why I'm so comfortable with it is because of the expression of HAKA. It just, throughout life, I was able to, for the many HAKA that I did, it was a part, even in that moment, for whatever I was doing it for, whether it be for rugby or some type of sports thing, it was also a part of releasing whatever anger could have been stored.
Right. Well, and I think that's an important point to make, just as a ground reference for the conversation, that anger is not only essential, but a fundamental part of the human experience.
Yes.
Every single one of us gets angry.
Yes.
Anger itself is not the devil here, right? Anger itself is not the enemy. It's the unhealthy ways in which anger can be expressed and or received, which is what I hear in what you're saying. And, we spoke earlier on before we started recording, and I was telling you about the event that I created with Jamie Schuster and Leon Ruri called Call of the Warrior back at the end of 2019, but before COVID times, when everything was different. And it was so cool to see the synchronicities here, because I'm not Indigenous Maori, but when I'll never forget the first time I saw a video of the HAKA, and it just like rattled my bones. I was tearing up, because it was, and in the particular HAKA I saw, it was all men. And to see men expressing and articulating themselves that way, I mean, I watched it on a YouTube video. It's not like I was experiencing it in the flesh, but even so, it rattled something inside of me. Like, oh my, that's available, and that's okay. And it's celebrated, because I can't remember exactly which video it was, but it was where there were men performing the HAKA, and just seeing the rest of the community receiving that energy. And some of them were becoming emotional about it, but there wasn't anybody who was scared. There wasn't anybody who appeared to feel threatened. It was the opposite of that. And so when I first saw the HAKA, I was like, I just wanted to learn it myself. I was like, someday I'm going to go and I'm going to learn from traditional folks of the power of this, because I could feel it just by witnessing. And then, and so serendipitously, it came together with Leon and Jamie to do that work. And so flashing forward to you bringing this and recognizing, identifying how important it is for men to be in their bodies and to be developing a more intimate relationship with that energy that we call anger or rage, and channeling it in a healthy way. That's the key there, right? It's not trying to eradicate the energy. It's finding a healthy place to put it.
Exactly. And if we if we look at this perspective of anger as emotion, it's just energy in motion. And if the energy has nowhere to go, it's just going to pile up inside this vessel, this human vessel. And just eventually it's going to pop, and it may come out in an unhealthy way.
Yeah. And so my experience in some of the things that I've done around anger, but this is before connecting with Jamie and Leon and learning about HAKA, was creating a container, an environment with men where there's agreements around safety, specifically confidentiality. We're never going to talk about what happens here. It stays here, it dies here. And then the leadership of whoever was conducting that space in giving permission for us to go there. And then the first and second and third man who was willing to go there, right? Like take off the mask, show the arrows and the wounds that are sticking out of his chest, right? And then witnessing the cascade of how things unfolded. So there's some really important elements to tapping into this energy for the first time because of what you said before about what society's told us. It's dangerous, it's aggressive. I mean, if nobody had any reference point for what the HAKA was, and you just went and performed the HAKA solo on the street corner in downtown LA, they're going to call the cops.
Yep.
That's society's reference. Like that man, especially you being an indigenous man, right? And you've got a darker skin complexion. I mean, you're probably going to end up in cuffs. Let's not pull punches, right?
Yeah.
So I'm digressing a little bit. What I really want to hear from you is, what is your belief around how we change our reference as a culture around anger? How do we make that motion forward? Because it seems like a lot of ground to cover.
Thank you for that question. And I really, really enjoy all your reflections, and your story is really great. For me, it is bringing awareness to that our anger isn't us, and bringing comfort and safety to the emotion of anger. And then after that is finding safe ways to express it, release it, and then safe ways to communicate. So firstly, it's just bringing awareness to anger is a safe emotion if it is safe. And just building a toolbox and starting to redesign that programming and the conditioning with men, for men, and through men, that anger is a safe expression, and it's just suppressed emotion and aspects of the inner warrior. Therefore, allows us to step into our courage, our protection archetype, and our provider archetype, and to fight for what we believe is of justice.
Beautiful, man. And it's so multi-layered, right? It's the courage and confidence to express and articulate anger and rage. It's the ability for the community to receive that and not feel threatened. So everyone has a personal stake in this transformation, and it is really big work. But like I said it before, I think that relationship with anger is actually at the root of many more of our social problems. To name a few: sexual abuse, sexual and physical violence, right? Just in general, where you hear about men perpetrating violence on other people, whether it's on other men, on children, on women. So much of that has to do, I believe, with this. It's like a relay race. It's like the anger was perpetrated upon them. So the only way they know how to express and articulate that is by violence on other people, even if it's not physical, right? Even just like emotional or verbal violence. So to me, it's like disrupting that culture, kind of like taking the baton and just knocking it out of the hand and introducing a new one, because it's really about what we're passing forward onto our kids. Right.
Totally. And part of the work in my master vision is first working with men and this idea of treatment, and then eventually stepping into the idea of prevention and working with kids and teenagers, and already giving them those tools when they step out into the adult world, to want, like you said, to like stop that baton, do the generational healing, do the ancestral healing, and start to create a new foundation of men that are warriors, but warriors that lead with their heart.
Yes. Yeah, man. Well, because what I've found is that when I am in those environments and contexts where I can explore and express my anger, that when I express it completely, usually that leads to stage 2, which is sadness or grief. Oftentimes the full expression of my anger leads me to tears, and I don't even know what it's about sometimes, but it's like underneath what's holding up anger is my grief and my sadness about who knows what it's about, right? All that unexpressed stuff. And if I continue to lean in and I allow myself to experience sadness and grief, like I'm talking about, water and fluids coming out of every facial orifice, just like, the nasty. Yeah. And if I go all the way through that, then it starts to spin up the other way towards ecstasy, joy. Sometimes I'll find myself like in a laughter where I almost feel like I'm crazy because I went from anger to sadness and crying. Now I'm laughing. It's a huge spectrum of emotions. And then when I've really gone all the way through that, then at the end, it's like emptiness.
Wow.
And I think that's the emotional journey that so many of us are waiting to have. But we get stuck at that point where we say, cut it off. Can't do that for reasons A, B, and C. So I'm wondering what you found in your own personal experience, if it's similar to what I found for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. What I heard from you is like the ability to feel the wave of emotion and not allowing the emotion to take you, but to be present with whatever emotions are rising in the wave that's going through, which allowed you to go through those stages. And so a couple of things with my journey is when I left my stepfather, and my mom was like, never crying again. That was it. It was done. And also a little bit more about my journey is in my experience of experiencing my stepfather, for whatever reason, whether it's based on nature or nurture, in those moments, I had so much compassion for what I was experiencing and had so much forgiveness and gratitude for him feeling safe enough to express his anger towards me, and the forgiveness of, they're like, oh, he must be in a lot of pain. And so I never held on to too much going through, but in some ways it's still there somatically. It's still there in the deeper layer parts of my vulnerability, especially when I'm with an intimate partner, of like either shutting down when I experience big emotions. And so my journey of rediscovering my wave of emotions and reconnecting with the opening of my tear ducts. And so, my journey is similar in terms of I feel the emotion for as long as it needs to be there for, without letting it consume me, but not ignoring it. And just really sitting and be like, just a lot of self-soothe techniques, which is physical touch on self, could be scented sage, nature, which allows me the safety to feel my emotions and go through those waves. A lot of my emotions that I experience most days are now just like a lot of tearful gratitude for a lot of things. And when I experience anger or frustration, it's a lot of breath work and meditation. And I guess the most important thing is giving myself choice to feel without judging the emotion, and experiencing the emotion together, not allowing the emotion to take me.
That's beautiful, man. It really caught me when you said, reintroducing yourself to your tear ducts, or however you said that. It made me curious if do you have a moment that stands out when you first allowed yourself to cry again, and what were the circumstances that led to that?
Yep. So it was a surprising passing. It was the spontaneous surprising passing of my best friend's mom. Was like a second mom to me. She passed away suddenly. And she was one of the most closest people that I've had that had passed away. And it was very natural and organic to cry. But in the same breath, I knew I wasn't just crying for her. And I knew there was just so much release happening from, let's say it was like maybe like 7 to 8 years of not crying. And just like, I had like, and I like, because of that, like it allowed me, like I cried, I remember in that I like maybe cried like 3-4 big ones. And always knew that it wasn't also just for her, it was also for everything. That I was like, from that really strong statement that I said to myself, I'm never crying again. And like I knew leading up to it, like after I started to hit my late teens and my early 20s, I'm like, it's time to start figuring out how to release this. And and it was just like a big release that started that process again of being able to feel and being able to express the emotion of crying.
Yeah, man. And I'll share another quick story. People who listen to the podcast know that in the past year, I lost a very close brother of mine. He was like a younger brother to me, and he passed away suddenly from an accidental overdose. And it was the first time in my adult life that I had sudden and tragic and unexpected loss so close to me. And the grief and the sadness from something like that is overwhelming. It's it's like nothing I've ever felt before. And I've had plenty of good cries over the years, but like just relentless waves of just one after the other and not even knowing where it was coming from. But an important lesson I learned during that time was that in the grief, in the pain of loss, I actually experienced an expansion of my capacity to love. That it's the ironic part of losing somebody, that when you lose someone or something happens that you become disconnected with and there's grief and sadness, it actually stretches the love continuum. And so bringing this back to the conversation we're having, where anger is sitting on top of sadness and grief, there's this cascade, or I'm sorry, there's this sequence that we go through that actually gives us a greater capacity to love and to appreciate all of those other emotions that are attached to love that are sometimes hard to describe. And I think that's where the euphoria comes from after we've really articulated those bigger, more uncomfortable emotions of sadness, anger, and grief. And I wonder if that's because when I was hearing your story, I was listening for what I interpreted to be the same, that there was like this untapped grief that you hadn't accessed, that when you allowed yourself to do it, I imagine it led to many of these other breakthroughs you've had.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for articulating that so well. And also, so sorry to hear about your loss.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely opened up those parts of me again. I'm like, and because I was consciously working, and I'm like, towards like, okay, cool, like I haven't cried for quite a number of years. And so it's time to start to heal that part, already having an awareness of healing and self-development, but very minimal. Like I was only at the starting of that journey. And so it was, it was such, like you said, like expansiveness, like being able to release parts that wherever that grief and sadness was stored, triggered by the passing of my friend's mom, and just like really opened up my capacity more to love, like you said as well. And now I'm also exploring tears with frustration. I'm like, oh, it's cool to like experience tears with frustration, tears of joy. And just now because of that work of really activating that, it's allowed me to experience that euphoric experience at the end of the tears. You know, it's like when the rain hits and then the sunshine, boom, there's a rainbow. I imagine that euphoric feeling is that rainbow at the end of that.
Beautiful metaphor, man. I really like that. And I think it's also important just to acknowledge the macho archetype that masculinity has borne for so many years, that it's really held on to. I think at this point, I don't know, maybe I'm still naive, but I think that we've really introduced this new possibility for what being a man in the world looks like. Men who are connected and responsible for their emotions, not emotionless robots that somehow try to contain this irrepressible force within our bodies, but humans who can actually articulate them in constructive and safe ways where it doesn't hurt the people around us. I think it's important just to acknowledge that piece too, because there's so much more that becomes available when we can tap into that. We already talked about that with the anger. We alluded to it with the grief and sadness, but also when men are really able to access their joy, it's like the most beautiful thing in the world. When you see like a big macho guy who's gone through his stuff and he's just lit up, like letting himself smile, it's amazing how infectious it is. And it's like you said, it's the sunshine that can come through, but we've got to walk through these levels and layers of our humanity and our emotions. And it's not an easy journey. It's a simple one because it's like boom, 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 but it's certainly not easy.
No, definitely not. Yeah, that's what a great image you painted in terms of the big macho man. And yeah, how I experienced that reflection is like just safety. Like a big macho man that's in his complete joy. Like he's a big dude, he could probably do some damage, but he's not there to do damage. He's there to love, provide, and be what could be that ideal father figure, which is the one to provide and protect. And that's the feeling I got from that.
Yeah. I'll bring in one more reference and we could start tying it up here. I love referencing the animal kingdom, and especially in like the marketing stuff these days, everyone's like, be a lion, be the beast, access because there is that part of ourselves. It's healthy to be able to tune into that too. But when you look at lions on the savannah and you watch National Geographic, like most of the time they're just laying around chilling. They're not in full, like baring their teeth, like ready to strike mode, unless they absolutely have to be. Yeah, absolutely. Unless it comes to life or death situations. And even when there's a standoff sometimes between lions and hyenas, sometimes they both agree like, hey, we're going to go our separate ways because chances are we're both going to get messed up and then it's game over for both of us. So aggression in that way is really only reserved for like the absolute essential moments of life or death. I got to protect myself or my loved ones from imminent danger. Everything else is unnecessary. Yeah. Right. And so just the balance of those things so that we're not, we need access to it, but it's also such a small percentage that we actually need. Yeah. So totally. Hopefully we live in a system where we never have to do it, but
hopefully never. It's like that metaphor or quote, maybe both. I'd rather be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war.
There you go. It's beautifully said, man. I love that one. Someone just brought that up this weekend when I was in a retreat too. So it's in the ethers. Yeah. Cyrus, fantastic. Man, time flies and we're just about at our time here, man. So I know we're going to have to do another one someday. I can tell that we're very synchronized with our work. So I'm looking forward to possibilities. I'm going to ask you some like lightning round style questions and then have you tell everybody where they can go to follow you and find you. Sound good?
Beautiful. Yep. Sounds good.
All right. So what's one thing you've learned in your life you wish you knew when you were 18?
Oh, lightning round. Emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, what we've been speaking about, emotional release, emotional IQ.
Yeah, let's take history out of schools and insert emotional intelligence. Well, I'll be better off for it. Yeah. And what do you think is the most important value to have as a man?
Integrity, but integrity to word and integrity to feeling. Integrity to word is the masculine. Keeping the word. Integrity to feeling is the feminine. Also noticing, I feel this. I want to honor this feeling, and then also make it an according adjustment. So integrity. Beautiful, man.
And last but not least, where can people follow you and go to find you and learn more about the incredible work you're doing?
You can find me at the Panda Shaman on Instagram, most active on Instagram. Or you can go to my website, www.tamatane.com, which is spelled TAMATAANE.com, where you can find my retreat that's coming up at the end of March, 28th of March to the 1st of April, where we dive into a lot of what we've been speaking about, especially HAKA.
Amazing, man. So grateful for you being on here today. So excited for the work that you're bringing out into the world, man. We definitely need more men on the front lines leading in that way, especially exploring the topics we talked about here. lots of luck to you, man. Wish you the best. And I look forward when we get to connect in person, hopefully in the near future.
Yes. Thank you so much, brother, for having me. I really, really appreciate it.